Hours later, Avin and Mile wake up in the Guia Inn, with Rael, Rouca, and Foreman Cassel watching over them. As the three make sure Avin and Mile are now fine after having been drugged, they start to piece together the events that had transpired. Foreman Cassel tells them that the real Grandma Rael is currently on a religious tour in Valcad, and the letter they had received from Eimelle was most certainly a forgery. The real Eimelle, in all likelihood, was the person that Rouca overheard the gossip about and is indeed in Koruna. Rael had also found the cabeza left behind at the scene and returned it to Avin, along with a quick report of what they witnessed. Avin and Mile managed to get a grasp on the situation, realizing Madam had, even if inadvertently, saved them along with Rael and Rouca. As Avin curses the black-haired girl for once again making an underhanded attempt to claim the cabeza, Rouca's face became significantly more dour, but he chose to swallow the fact that the person that had brought them to harm was his own sister for now. Seeing Avin and Mile recovered and determined to resume their trip, Foreman Cassel bids them farewell, returning to the factory with a suddenly very depressed Rouca in tow. Even Rael comments that Rouca suddenly no longer seemed like himself since having discovered them in that house. Regardless, with this little incident in Guia behind them, Avin and Mile decide to head off to Koruna immediately. But Rael, still at the scene, insists on coming along, using the fact that he has saved the two as leverage. Though Avin and Mile remind him that Professor Eleanor still wants him to attend class instead, Rael dismisses that idea entirely and would not take no for an answer. Hoping that he wouldn't get into too much trouble under their supervision, Avin and Mile reluctantly agree to take Rael with them for now as they set off for Koruna. The village of Koruna is known for three things: their worship of Durga over Bardis, ice fishing, and their local breed of hunting dogs. As the three finished their arduous trip to the northernmost settlement in Elfilden, the air had turned considerably frigid, but they found a village that resembles a warm, homely hovel standing before the eternally wintry polar peaks. In this quaint town was a large building holding a statue depicting Durga, while the local townspeople were all too happy to greet some visitors. The three of them ask around town and eventually secure one lead. A local tells them that he did in fact see a red-haired girl pass through the town recently. She had headed to Lassi Sacra, a frozen shrine north of Koruna, housing what is commonly referred to as an avatar-like construct, said to be a manifestation of Durga in the mortal world. However, the man quickly dashes Avin's hopes as quickly as it was roused, since he tells them that this red-haired girl had left Koruna just a week ago after visiting the ice shrine, and that shortly after she had left, Lassi Sacra suffered an earthquake, and the locals are still unsure of what's happened inside the shrine since. Dismayed that they had missed Eimelle by just a week, Avin and crew nonetheless decide to visit this Lassi Sacra and see the place for themselves, hoping that it would perhaps yield some sort of clue on where Eimelle could have gone. Borrowing the key from the village, the group makes quick time towards Lassi Sacra, the ground beneath them turning from plateau to deep snow as they went even further north. Despite it being the middle of the year, the shrine encased in these mountains seems to be locked in an eternal winter. Lassi Sacra itself lay frozen and abandoned. Sitting at the depths of the shrine was the avatar of Durga, recently shattered to pieces following the earthquake that the locals told them about. As Avin and crew scout around the shrine, they find it predictably yet still disappointingly unremarkable. Eimelle is long gone from here, and the avatar of Durga appears to be a dormant ruin. Rael, however, thinks otherwise. Given his exceptional aptitude in magic, he manages to sense some dormant power remaining in the debris. Chanting a brief invocation, Rael manages to extract the remaining traces of magic inside the statue, manifesting a mysterious red book from Durga's form. The crew picks up the book and flips through it, discovering its contents to be written in an ancient script. They decide to take it back to Koruna and examine it further, but just as they begin to settle down in the worship room back in the village, Rael discovers something incredible in the book. Though his knowledge on the ancient tongue is only rudimentary, he is convinced that they stumbled onto something big. Rael suddenly asks Avin and Mile to go to the Magic Academy and contact Eleanor, and ask her to come here to examine the find with him. Though the two seem puzzled by Rael's sudden change of heart to contact the person that's been looking to lecture him all this time, as well as his personality noticeably shifting to a much more impulsive and hasty one. Rael, however, assures the two that it'll be fine, telling them that once Eleanor realizes what he has found, she will be showering him with praise rather than lecturing him on his truancy. Though Avin and Mile still have doubts, they decide to oblige regardless and head off on a long trek back down south toward the Magic Academy. The Magic Academy, or Magic University, is the only major institute of magical study and research in Alfelden. As is the case with its neighboring city Guia, much of the funding to the Magic Academy comes from the Felden royal family, granting the Academy itself the necessary funds for both its operations and its cost to serve the continent, and by extension the Church of Bardus in the continual research and development of magic. A well-known branch of research conducted by the Academy is the study of deism in Alfelden, and Professor Eleanor, whose expertise revolves around ancient magic once used by Durga, is at the forefront of this field. Hoping she would have more answers for their find in Lassie Sakra, Avin and Mile step foot into the prestigious academy, only to find her under attack. Somehow, the Shamshir gang had managed to infiltrate the academy and sneakily cornered Eleanor, and Fatima herself had shown up for this operation. As it turns out, since their operation in Tibri village, Fatima had not given up on her search for the Book of Life. Knowing the Magic Academy is a repository of knowledge on this topic, she had decided to pay Professor Eleanor a less than friendly visit. Avin and Mile quickly intervene, saving Professor Eleanor as the Shamshir gang make another hasty retreat, fleeing through a window and disappearing from the premises before Avin could give chase. Fearing an ambush, the group reluctantly allows Fatima to flee for a second time. Eleanor invites Avin and Mile to her classroom and thanks them for saving her, bringing the topic to Rael and the purpose of their visit. After apologizing for taking Rael even further away, Mile asks Eleanor about him. In their brief travel together, it became abundantly clear that Rael's talent in magic is no boast. He really is as good as he claims he is. Would someone like him really need to study more at the academy? Eleanor agrees with his assessment. Rael is truly a once-in-a-lifetime kind of genius, but tells them that Rael's power is exactly why he needs to study more. Since Rael's immaturity is not only his biggest roadblock towards success, but it may even come to harm him one day. She tells them that magical power can be wild and untamed, and to someone without the emotional maturity to responsibly control their power, it can lead to their own downfall. Trying to drill this lesson into Rael's head had been a constant source of headache for her, but if he was able to excavate an artifact from a shrine to Durga, this is something worth investigating. Eleanor decides to join the two and return to Koruna. However, when they made their way back to the icy village, they found the entire place in a state of absolute chaos, with Rael seemingly commanding the local hunting dogs to his whim. Rael is overjoyed upon seeing Eleanor, declaring to the group the book that they have found was none other than the legendary spellbook, which records the very magic of creation once wielded by Durga, the Book of Life, the very same book that Fatima had been pursuing all this time. As Avin and Mile are both shocked by this revelation, Eleanor is furious, immediately scolding Rael for so wantonly wielding such ancient and dangerous magic. She pleads with Rael to hand over the Book of Life and settle down, but Rael remains annoyed. Having had enough with Eleanor's constant forbiddance of his use of magic, he decides to use the Book of Life spells as a showcase of his power to impress his teacher, and use this to convince her of his aptitude. Seeing the situation unfold, Eleanor tells Avin and Mile that ancient magic, particularly those recorded in the Book of Life, is not a tome that can be used by current-day humans, and those attempting to evoke its ancient scripts do so at unimaginable risk to themselves. Trying to disarm Rael as quickly as possible before he can do more harm, the group hurries after him, running through the terrified populace attempting to confront Rael, who is now drunk on power and in a manic frenzy. Avin's party can only try to apprehend him, with little success. As the chase continues through the village of Koruna, Rael manages to lose Avin briefly, but is suddenly confronted by a masked assailant who swiftly chases after him and knocks him unconscious, taking the Book of Life away. At the same time, Fatima and her men arrive in Koruna as well, though she seems extremely unhappy to see the masked assassin, identifying him as a henchman working for a man named Borgide. She demands the assailant hand over the goods, as securing the Book of Life was a task assigned to her squad from Bellius himself, and Borgide's men have no right to steal the job away from her. These words unfortunately fall on deaf ears as the assassin makes a swift retreat. Avin's crew catches up to the scene shortly after. Seeing the situation, he assumes that Fatima had attacked Rael and taken the book, an accusation that she is quick to clear her name on. Though with the book gone and her mark stolen, Fatima sees no more value to linger in Koruna, deciding to retreat for now. However, she seems bitter about someone else having swiped her task away, and decides to pass a friendly warning to Avin that Guia is going to be in mortal danger unless they can intervene. With the situation in Koruna settled for now, the group takes Rael in for treatment and explains the situation to the locals. As Rael comes to, Eleanor is finally able to have the heart-to-heart that she's always wanted. As Rael tells Eleanor that the reason for his rebellious streak is because he disliked how strict Eleanor had always been toward him. In response, Eleanor sternly reminds Rael that he's still just a young child, and despite his personal aptitude, he still has yet to learn that his yearning for independence also comes with much more responsibility. She asks Rael to think back and reflect on when he was using the Book of Life, and the mental state he was in at the time. Rael quiets down and admits to being terrified, having experienced handling an otherworldly power course through him to a magnitude that he could not handle. It was as if he had lost control of his own body and was caught in a manic frenzy to release his power at anything in sight. Realizing that although his own talents are extraordinary, he does still have a long way to go, Rael promises to start taking his studies more seriously, as it seems like this incident was finally the catalyst for Eleanor to get through to her pupil. After apologizing to the Koruna villagers for the trouble he's caused, the crew regroups and thinks on Fatima's ominous warning, and decides to head back to Guia to check on the situation. It did not take long for Avin's party to realize what Fatima meant by Guia's mortal danger. The instant they step into town, they are greeted to the horrifying sight of monsters running rampant through the streets. Diving into the rescue effort to save as many civilians as they can, Rael spots the masked assailant that took the Book of Life from him. As the group confronts him, the assassin takes out the legendary spellbook and summons hordes of monsters right before their eyes, and retreats away, fleeing Guia for good. Although the Book of Life has been taken from them, the party now has more pressing matters to attend to. As fierce fighting against an army of summoned monsters continues on the streets, Avin's group travel from building to building, trying their best to exterminate every last creature assaulting Guia, protecting as many people as possible. When it seems like the streets of Guia had finally quieted down, Avin and crew decide to head into the Guia factory to check on Foreman Cassel and Rouca. But at the door, they discover the guards posted by the factory entrance had all been taken down. One of the wounded guards begs them to hurry. A sorcerer and his entourage have entered the factories with ill intentions. Cassel and Rouca are in grave danger. Charging into the factories, the team is shocked to find the place already set ablaze. While deeper inside, the aforementioned sorcerer with a few elite cultists have already confronted Cassel and Rouca, repeating their previous demand for Guia factory to produce a weapon made from a special metal. Cassel refuses, telling the sorcerer that Guia factory currently does not have the expertise to work with such a metal, and even if they did, the factory will never produce weaponry for nefarious individuals. The sorcerer, in turn, amused by Cassel's defiance, declares himself as Boar Guide, the right-hand man of Bellius and the second-in-command of the Cult of Octum, threatening to blow up the entire factory should this demand not be met. Rouca does not take kindly to this threat. Thinking back to his deceased parents and now his absent sister, the thought of losing the factory as well was too much for him to bear. Impulsively charging to tackle Boar Guide, he is quickly intercepted by his bodyguard, who deals a severe blow to him, gravely injuring Rouca. Boar Guide then decides to kill both of them for their defiance and winds up for a powerful spell, with Avin thankfully charging in at the last second to parry the blow. Determined to stop the Cult of Octum from further damage, Avin stands firm, shielding a severely injured Rouca with his own body while Boar Guide rears up for his next attack. But surprisingly, Rutis of all people jumps in to intervene. She rebukes Boar Guide for having deceived her, as she had made him swear to never bring harm to the citizens of Guia, and especially not her own brother during this operation, as that is not what she believes the Cult of Octum stood for. In response, Boar Guide cackles maniacally, pointing out with sadistically that Rutis is still far too naive, and in fact, tells her that Lord Bellius himself was planning to order Rutis to kill her own brother as a test of her resolve, a statement that Rutis refuses to believe. As she demands Boar Guide stop spouting lies, the Dark Sorcerer shouts her down, and reminds her to know her place. He is more than happy to eliminate both her and her brother for their insolence. At this critical juncture, another person enters the fray. Magnum, having found a flank to engage during their conversation, jumps into the fight, and with his expert skills, swiftly takes down all of Boar Guide's bodyguards without breaking a sweat. Tired of all the pests that are interrupting his grand plans, Boar Guide goes all out, unleashing a barrage of magic toward both Madam and Avin's group. The incoming assault by Boar Guide proves to be exceptionally fierce, as Madam is forced on the defensive and Avin's group is being shielded by Rutis, unable to press forward. The Molten Crucible, no longer able to sustain from the heat generated by the incoming attacks, overloads and detonates, drowning the factory in a lake of lava. Delighted by this destruction, and having wrought upon the Guia factory a baptism in flame, Boar Guide leaves the scene, with Magnum retreating quickly after, but not before Avin stops him and asks him why he would help. An apathetic Magnum simply replies that both Octum and Bardus are his mortal enemies, reminding Avin that he won't hesitate to turn his blade against them as well if they declare their affiliations to be with Bardus. With Magnum having retreated, Rutis hurries over, cradling a barely conscious Rouca in her arms, desperately calling his name. As Rouca struggles to open his eyes, he finally sees Rutis once again. As the siblings share a very bittersweet reunion amidst the burning factory, Rouca succumbs to his wounds and falls unconscious. In the aftermath, as the factory is undergoing emergency repairs, Rouca is taken in for urgent treatment while Cassel thanks the group for saving their lives. He tells them that the Cult of Octum has made the demand for a weapon to be forged with a rare metal multiple times. Alanova expresses some familiarity with the metal in question. Lightweight, sturdy, and can easily be imbued with magic. Cassel tells them that this magical alloy is exceptionally difficult to refine. It would be beyond their capabilities to forge the alloy into a dagger, let alone a much bigger weapon. On top of that, the Guia factory will never willingly cooperate with the Cult of Octum. But he never thought the cult would take such drastic measures in the wake of the factory's refusal. Meanwhile, having seen that Rouca's injuries have been stabilized, Rutis plans to leave Guia, with Avin questioning her motives. He asks why she wouldn't stay with Rouca and live peacefully, and why she would serve the Cult of Octum, a story that Rutis is unwilling to divulge, claiming Avin could not possibly understand the life that she had been through, simply telling him that she believes in Octum's desire to reshape this corrupt world. Avin counters, asking if her ideals are worth Rouca's life, a question that seems to have given her pause. Though they remain enemies, Rutis nonetheless expresses her gratitude to Avin for having protected Rouca in his journey, and promises that in return she will no longer hunt him for the Cabeza and withdraw from the mission. She also divulges internal intel from the cult to Avin. Approximately a week ago, a young red-haired girl had been seen in the port town of Balloa, and suggests that he hurry there as well before the cult can beat him to it. As Rutis leaves Guia, Avin makes his way back to a now awake Rouca, who had heard the entire exchange between Avin and Rutis. Though Avin is sullen that he is unable to reunite the two siblings, Rouca seems to have cheered up significantly, as just knowing that Rutis is still alive and well is more than good enough for him. He tells Avin to hurry and make his way to Balloa, sincerely hoping that he will be able to reunite with Eimelle. Avin and Mile thank Rouca for being such a good friend to them and wish him a swift recovery, promising if they cross paths with Rutis again, they will do everything in their power to convince her to return to his side. With that, Avin and the crew leave the Guia factory, broken and destroyed but already under repair. As they wrap up this chapter of this journey, Rael quietly reflects on himself, having seen his close friend's stoicism in the face of loss, reunion, and sorrow. The teacher-student duo leave Guia with Avin, escorting them as far as the crossroad to the Magic Academy. As they say their parting words to Rael and Elenova, Avin asks the professor a question about Durga, whether or not she's heard of Durga's daughter, and why such an individual may be a person of interest to the Cult of Octum. Though Elenova only knows a surface amount about the young women that are branded as the daughters of Durga, she tells Avin more about Durga herself. Aside from being the creator of the four guardian deities, she is also the watcher of the underworld, the place where Bardas had sealed Octum at the end of their war long ago. As Durga's daughter is an agent of Durga herself, that connection may serve as a key piece to this puzzle. Realizing Avin's sister is the daughter in question, the gravity of the situation had become much more apparent to all of them. Rael pipes up, volunteering to accompany Avin to look for his sister, an offer that Avin and Mile smile and take a rain check on, reminding Rael to start taking his studies a lot more seriously so that the next time their paths cross, he can finally show them what he's really made of. On that note, Rael and Elenova say their goodbyes as they return to the academy. With tip-offs coming from the most unlikely sources and the looming shadow of the Cult of Octum rapidly spreading, the urgency of Avin's mission suddenly seems grander than ever as the cruel burden of destiny on Eimelle starts to rear its head. Preparing themselves to act on Rutis' intel, Avin and Mile quickly make their way further west to the westernmost city on this half of the continent, the prosperous port town of Balloa. The continent of Elfilden is divided into two major landmasses, the western land of Deuces and the eastern land of Boreas. The only connector between these two regions goes through the port city of Balloa. As the city itself oversees almost all maritime trade across the continent, Balloa is extraordinarily large, busy, and wealthy. Despite its exterior of grandeur, the people in the city itself enjoy very peaceful lives thanks to the benevolent and righteous leadership of its barony. As Avin and Mile set about their long trek from Guia to Balloa, they cross a bridge over a river and are met by two figures, a well-built man and a sailor. The two had heard about the attack on Guia and asked if Avin and Mile knew anything about it. The young adventurers are happy to oblige, reporting that the attack on Guia had been repelled, though the factory itself suffered major damage and would not be operational again for some time. Though the two men are glad to hear the personnel are safe, the factory being down puts a wrench in their plans, since the sailor was planning to pick up some new parts for his ship. Nonetheless, the two of them decide to head for Guia anyway, stating that they're friends with Foreman Cassel and want to check up on their condition. Thanking Avin and Mile for the information, the two men continue toward Guia. As our heroes watch the two men leave, they remark that the man exuded an aura of authority and dignity, while the sailor also seemed exceptionally capable, and wondered who they were before continuing onwards to Balloa. The road to the next city is long and fraught with danger. Monster outbreaks seem to have increased in intensity since the events that had transpired in Guia, making the pair's journey quite difficult along the way. When they finally reached Balloa, the two were greeted to a city much bigger than their original expectations. The port town is exceptionally prosperous due to its mercantile nature, and Eimelle is reportedly somewhere in this city. The two decide to start by asking around town, trying to pick up any leads on her whereabouts. The two start in the inn and find a merchant gleefully mumbling to himself. They learn that his name is Garcia, a strangely familiar one. Mile recalls that this was the merchant who had purchased the Thunderblade from the Shamshir gang and therefore caused Douglas an endless amount of grief before the two were able to recover it on his behalf. Realizing he's standing before the man himself, Avin immediately decides to confront him, berating Garcia for the trouble he's caused their friend. Garcia did not take kindly to a boy in his teens yelling at him for no reason, and rudely tells them to back off. A hot-headed Avin remains upset at him, accusing him of illegal dealings with a criminal group. In response, Garcia reminds him that all his business dealings are above board, and as far as he's concerned, all he did was purchase a sword and resell it to Mayor Doyle of Baron, and he really can't be held responsible for the distress this has caused any other individual. Though his dismissive attitude only serves to further anger Avin, Mile steps in and reminds his friend that while Garcia's words are grating, he is in the right. Trying to argue with him more on this point would be very unproductive. Avin can't help but agree, despite still holding some intense grudges. He decides to leave Garcia alone for now, though still huffing at each other in anger. Deeper into the city, the two run into Karamis, an affair that is at this point an old song and dance. The author is, as usual, evasive when it comes to the topic of his editor's constant pursuit, but welcomed the additional inspiration provided by his two newest friends. The two continue their tours throughout Balloa and get a general idea of the city from the townsfolk. Balloa is under the leadership of a man named Baron Conrad. Despite his young age, Conrad is a widely respected figure, and his wife, Teresia, is described as a beautiful, kind, and refined noblewoman. Together, Conrad and Teresia are the talk of the town. Young men flock to Baron Conrad as their role model, and young women look to Teresia as their subject of envy. Avin and Mile decide to pay a visit to the Baron, only to be stopped by a young man volunteering to guard his estate. Explaining to the two that Baron Conrad is currently out on business, he asks the two to come back later. As a dejected Avin leaves the Baron's estate and roams Balloa, not a trace of Eimelle in sight, he wonders if this lead would also be a dead end. Mile tries his best to cheer his friend up, but is interrupted by a panicked young man running along the streets, shouting for Baron Conrad. Running into Avin and Mile, the young man told them that monsters are swarming outside the city gates and are planning to venture inside. With Baron Conrad absent, the pair decide to help defend Balloa and hurried to the northern exit. The adult residents of Balloa try to put up a fight, but were no match for the incoming creatures. Avin and Mile jump in to take over, swiftly dispatching the enemies. While the Balloan residents thank the two for their efforts, the man and sailor duo that Avin and Mile met on the bridge enters the scene. The townspeople immediately swarm around the well-built man, referring to him as their beloved Baron Conrad. Conrad identifies Avin and Mile as the saviors of Balloa from this monster incident and extends his deepest gratitude, introducing the sailor beside him as Thomas, the current acting captain of the cruiser ship Planetos. The four of them become quick friends over a nice chat before Thomas departs to attend to his business with the Planetos. Conrad offers Avin and Mile to stop by his home, offering to treat them to dinner as a token of thanks. Hearing that Avin is here to look for his sister, Conrad also pledges to lend as much of his help to the cause as possible. The three return to Conrad's estate and relieve the townsperson that had volunteered to guard his home. Avin and Mile remarks to Conrad that he seems like a very beloved figure, a statement that, while he acknowledges, Conrad tells the two that this is simply more motivation for him to work even harder to be worthy of the goodwill that the town had given him. A young woman steps out of their home to greet Conrad and crew. Conrad returns the welcome and introduces the woman to Avin and Mile as his wife, Teresia, a woman just as beautiful and kind as the town had made her out to be. Teresia is more than happy to welcome two new guests to stay at their home, but apologizes to Avin and Mile. She wouldn't be able to offer them her fullest hospitality, as their estate has been housing another guest for almost a week now. A young teenage girl that they found unconscious on the road to Balloa. Conrad agrees and tells Avin and Mile that he thinks they'll get along. He says that the girl's name is Eimelle. As if right on cue, the voice of Avin's long-lost sister, a voice that he hadn't heard in 8 years, called out to him. Everyone stood in shock as Conrad and Teresia made way for the young girl. A dazzled Avin, his legs suddenly as weighty as lead, took a few lumbering steps forward, his long-lost sibling before him, a sight that he could not bring himself to process. Right there, in the streets of Balloa, surrounded by the serene oceanside breeze, the siblings embrace each other, having finally been reunited in the most unlikely of places. Avin and Eimelle spend the next several hours in Conrad's house catching up with each other. Avin formally introduces his best friend, Mile, to his sister. While Mile himself is delighted to see his friend finally achieve his life's goal, relief and happiness soon gave way to joyous prodding as Mile hits it off with Eimelle almost immediately, bonding over teasing Avin on everything and anything imaginable at his expense, spreading a cheerful atmosphere throughout the Baron's house. Conrad and Teresia give their heartfelt congratulations to Avin and Eimelle on their reunion. Knowing that Avin's journey will soon take him to Valkid, Conrad offers Avin and his friends passage to the western land of Deuces aboard a charter ship at his expense. Though as the last charter ship of the day had already sailed, the Baron and his wife insist that the three must spend the night with them and depart on the following day. Teresia sets off on dinner prep, while Conrad offers Avin to bring Eimelle with him on a tour of Balloa. Now that the siblings have finally reunited, this is a great opportunity to enjoy each other's company. Avin and crew profusely thank Conrad for his immense hospitality and take him up on his offer. With his beloved sister in tow, Avin, Mile, and Eimelle set off on a leisurely walk around the city. The crew go off and say their greetings to Thomas first, who is drinking in the bar waiting for his ship to return to port. Before touring the city proper, they traveled out to the Balloa docks, beholding the wide and majestic sea before them. Remarking that Valkid, and the end of their quest, is just beyond these waters, the sense that their long journey is nearing its end is a very surreal feeling. The crew relaxes while a white bird flies overhead, which Eimelle identifies as a messenger pigeon, seeing that it has something attached to its leg. As the friends play around with each other, they wonder what the pigeon was for, since in this day and age, it's rare to see people using mail carrier birds for correspondence. Turning back toward the streets, Avin and Eimelle find a strange merchant in a corner of the town pub peddling his wares. The group approaches to check out the man's curios, seeing a truly exotic and strange list of items before them. A shimmering feather, an all-natural cane, a time-traveling crystal that works by making you sleepy if you stare at it too long, an overcoat for a sage, and of course, sexy undergarments. Though most of the salesman's items range between uninteresting to plain weird, one item in particular catches Eimmelle's eye: a pair of earrings to be given to two people, and its wearers will never be separated as long as they both have it. She timidly asks Avin to buy it for her, telling him now that they're reunited, she doesn't want to part with him again. Seeing Eimmelle's plight, Avin acquiesces and asks to buy the earrings. Sensing that there's more than what's on the surface level, the surprisingly kind merchant parts with the earrings for free, handing a set to Avin and Eimelle along with his best wishes. The next stop of their tour took them to a resting stop in Balloa. Deciding to take a break, the three relax and admire the view of the Balloan River. Eimelle couldn't help but reminisce about their time as children, when Avin would ditch class to go swimming in the river behind Cathedral. He would even drag Eimelle there with him, getting both of them in trouble. This amuses Mile, who recalls Avin also having skipped class while being taught by Sage Lemurus, and would similarly also peer pressure Mile into ditching school with him. The two of them started to happily share the common experience of getting yelled at by Olesia and Lemurus respectively in their youth on account of Avin's terrible influence, very much so at Avin's expense. Pretending to be upset, Avin jokingly storms off from this conversation and heads to the pub to get the three of them some refreshments. With Avin gone, Eimelle and Mile continue to chat with each other and manage to quickly bond over their time around Avin. While Eimelle is glad for her brother that he has found such a reliable and stoic friend, Mile in turn is just as happy as Avin to see Eimelle safe and sound after so long. But while they're chatting up a storm, who else should find their way to Balloa but Shannon, in a miserable daze since being left behind in Nuba room, but still filled with fiery passion in her search for her beloved Mile. Shannon overhears Mile's voice and turns in shock. Eavesdropping on the conversation, she mistakes Eimelle as Mile's lover. Devastated by the idea that her destined prince had found love without her, an inconsolable Shannon runs away from Balloa, crying her eyes out, with a confused Avin managing to catch a glimpse of her as she runs off. Avin meets back up with the group, wielding refreshing drinks in his hand and fresh gossip on his lips. The mere mention that he thinks he saw Shannon just now was enough to send deathly shivers down Mile's spine. Finally able to tease Mile for a change, Avin starts whispering to Eimelle, privately regaling her with the tales of Mile and Shannon's fateful encounters, no doubt with a lot of colorful edits splattered in, much to Mile's dismay. The joyful day of touring soon comes to an end. As Avin and crew return to Baron Conrad's estate, Eimelle stops at the door, asking to speak with Avin privately. Sensing that Eimelle is troubled by something, Mile graciously excuses himself, giving his rather dense friend a heads up about Eimmelle's sudden shift in demeanor, and runs off to help Teresa with dinner preparations. Eimelle and Avin are now alone with each other. She decides to confide in Avin on her whereabouts over the past 8 years, and the realization of what she had become since. Though their initial days of separation are a whirlwind of events, Eimelle remembers a rather difficult transition to Benekia Monastery. Despite meeting a new best friend in Yuna, and with Olesia still watching over her, she spent a lot of sleepless nights crying herself to sleep in the initial days of their separation. As time passed and Eimelle reached her teenage years, that's when it began. A faint voice calling to her from deep inside, a voice that was reminiscent, though not exactly, the voice of their late mother. Calming, soothing, yet firm. A voice which told her the time for her destiny had arrived. Guided by it, Eimelle silently left the monastery behind, left Olesia and Yuna behind, and began to travel in the direction of her promised fate, believing that she'll be destined to reunite with Avin somewhere along this road. The voice had guided her to Koruna, and when she had arrived, it was clearer and stronger than ever before, until her footsteps took her into the sanctum of Lassie Sacra. There she saw an image that seemed almost mirage-like, and that's when the voice finally introduced itself as Durga, and then, more importantly, called Eimelle her daughter. Durga spoke to her, giving her a vague warning for the times ahead. Should the world fall on the brink of ruin, Eimelle will find herself at the center of fate. When that happens, she is to cling onto her passion and faith so that she may guide her own destiny. After these words, Durga leaves behind a red-colored accessory to Eimelle, and afterwards collapses into rubble, in the same state that Avin's party found it roughly a week later. Eimelle's journey did not continue long from there, as she soon collapsed from exhaustion and was found and taken in by Baron Conrad, leading to the events of today. Recounting her brief travel, Eimelle can't help but feel like the entire thing had been a dream, though she knows for a fact it's not, presenting the red jewel given to her by Durga as proof. Avin identifies it as being very similar to the Cabeza. Eimelle says that the artifact is called the Querrupo. Much like how the Cabeza is known as the head of Bardis, Querrupo is the body, and another one of the 6 fragments of the God of Light. Understanding that they should now take both Cabeza and Querrupo to meet with Archbishop Qurar in Valkid, Eimelle decides to entrust the body of Bardis to Avin's care. Tearfully, Eimelle confesses that a part of her wished that she did not reunite with Avin. Knowing the fate she is destined toward is one of great turmoil, a part of her desperately wants to spare her brother, her last remaining family member, from the impending tides of strife. But Avin comforts her, reassuring her that this was the journey he chose, with the singular goal of reuniting with Eimelle. Now that they're finally together again, he remains determined to face the incoming darkness and protect Eimelle no matter what. The siblings share a tender moment before heading in for dinner with Baron Conrad. As the day wraps up on the peaceful town, the group is treated to warm beds as they fall asleep thanks to Teresia's care. The present moment of happiness and serenity seemed almost fleeting, but it was nonetheless real, as unbelievable as it would seem.